Okay, we're back.
We are back.
Creation Crucible episode 2.
Deuce.
Yeah, Deuce. And we are going to basically just get you in here really quickly to map making part 2. And how many episodes do you think this is going to take?
A few.
Yeah.
A little, behind the scenes for you is that we thought it was going to take a few, and then we actually started doing some of this, and we realized that some of the items that we had for one episode, probably a little much for one episode. So it's definitely extended it. Like, we had a layout of like, boom, 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 this is what this episode contains, the layout, only to record a few of those parts, couple of those parts, and realize that there was still a lot more to go. So it's more than we thought.
Yeah, best laid plans, right? So ultimately, we're trying to do, I guess our intention here is to basically give the internet maybe, I'm not sure if this is the actual case, but maybe the most intensive or best, most thorough map making tutorial. Is that right? I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do. Not, again, we haven't scoured the internet for every map making video, but really we have done some research, and there are some good videos out there. But just like you're going to see in another video coming very soon, the map making seems to be a little bit of an afterthought in a lot of novels and a lot of videos. So hopefully this will give, we're going to give it our best shot. Hopefully this will give you guys a very deep dive into how we make maps, but also in ways to make maps that maybe aren't discussed or gone through out there. So
Yeah.
And if you look behind Cody's head, what is that? I mean, we are in it. Yeah, right. So
it's still November, but for a lot of people, that's close enough. Quite frankly, Halloween was close enough for some people.
Well,
I disagree, but
I mean, really, ultimately, for my wife, Bobby, her itch starts about September.
Right. Yeah.
And, it just, day after Halloween. In fact, this year, it was only a couple days after Halloween because we were traveling. But yeah, Christmas is up at our house. Maybe we'll do a little snippet of what that looks like, because Santa Claus did throw up. The reindeer threw up.
All in this
Jack
house.
Frost threw up.
Every single room. All of it.
Every single room has something in it to Father Christmas. So we're, it's a good time of the year. Things are going great. And so without further explanation or jaw-jacking, we should get into it, right? And we'll close the show out in this video to get you hopefully into the next video, which again will be even more detailed and deep diving into map making and world building. So
if you haven't seen the first episode yet, I would highly advise that you come back to this video and go watch episode 1. If you just stumbled upon this with your algorithm or your For You page, go onto our channel, check out the first episode, then come back and finish this one. And where we're starting out will make a lot more sense, because we are starting out immediately where we left you guys off in the last episode. And also, before anything else, please go ahead and like this video. Give us a subscription if you like what you see. And hey, if you guys are creative out there, if you just want to throw up some things that you've done to create fantasy maps, some of your creative process. Doesn't even have to be about maps, but that's what we're focusing on. Feel free to leave a comment in, the videos and one of the shorts or anything like that. So we'd very much appreciate that.
And if you have any questions or tips or ideas that you want to give us or throw our way, just leave them in the comments below. And we'll do our best to leave links to the things that we're going to use in this video. You're going to see us use brush tips in Photoshop. You're going to see us use techniques in Photoshop. And, those are the main tools we are using. There are other tools, and we went over that in the first video. But, yeah, so feel free to give us your ideas and tips that you have that everyone can see and benefit from. So let's get into it. Part 2 of map making and world building on the Creation Crucible.
All right, so here we are back with the same map that we completed in the last episode. And as you can see, we've made it a solid shape. We're taking things right where we left off. We have already saved this thing as an actual shape here in Photoshop. So the only thing that I've done is I've added just a white layer to act as like a temporary background for right now, so you can make out the shape against the white and black hard contrast. But it's starting to look like a map. It looks pretty fantastic. So the first thing we're going to do is I have actually some pictures that I took a long time ago of some leather samples that you see right here. This is various different types of leather. We had whole hides, half hides, but I would lay them out and take pictures of them. And in a map that we've already created for ourselves in our world, we've used some of these same things. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this map a little bit of life. I'm going to drag this leather sample here into Photoshop. However you want to get it in there is up to you. If you want to open it in a new window and move it over, that's fine. If you're using something like GIMP or some other software, you can use anything that you want. It doesn't have to be leather. However, this is a really, really great textured material to use for this kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, you can find these exact same samples on our Patreon if you want to head there after this video, or if you even want to pause it right here and go check it out. You can get these exact same samples if you want to do this exact same thing and follow along. So I have it here in our image. What we're basically going to end up doing is we're going to make this nice little this matte tan amber color leather. What we're going to do is we're going to actually use this as the land, as part of the continent itself. And so we're going to get this from looking like a sterile black and white image to something real. So what we're going to do is make sure that you go to your shape tool. Hotkey is U, or you can go to the toolbar, and you want to make sure that it's set on path. Not shape this time. You want it to be set to path for what we're about to do. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to make this into a vector mask. Now, as I'm pulling it across here, you can see that it's maintaining its shape really well, and I can move it around. That's because I'm holding the Shift key as I'm doing this. If you have it centered somewhere and you want it to grow out from a specific point, you can hold Shift-Alt. And this will increase your image while keeping it centered on where you started. And then you just hold down the space bar to move it around. We don't need it to be the exact size and shape as what you saw earlier. I probably am going to make it a little bit larger, but it's just going to be all up to you. What size image do you want to use? That's going to be your territory, your domain. For me, I want the leather to fill up the entirety of the image. Then we are going to make our shape or our path. Then go ahead and we are going to get on there and hotkey A for our selection tool. Then you're going to right click on it as you just saw, and voila, create a vector mask. Now you have this lovely, lovely little piece here that has added a lot of texture already and makes this continent start to have a little bit of color, a little bit of life, not looking so bland anymore. So now that we have it here, one thing I want to show you is that these are linked together. The mask and the leather swatch itself are currently connected, meaning no matter what you do and move it around, it's going to move both. If you try to resize it, it's going to resize everything. So what you can do is click that little chain link in the center between those 2 points. And at that moment, that unlinks them. So you can have free reign to size and move your vector mask all you want. You can resize it. Let's make it just a little bit bigger here. Get it just a little bit, closer to what that original shape size was. And once we've done that, we're going to click back in that center point again. That link should appear back and it'll connect those 2 pieces together. So that's just a quick tip. So if you want to do any sort of editing with either your vector mask itself and that path that you have making your map, your continent, or your island, or whatever you're working with, your entire world, or if you want to do some resizing and moving around, if there's some place on a piece of leather or some other image that you want to use, you can go ahead and move it around and resize it and reshape it to your will without affecting the path that you've made. So now that we've done that, it's looking real nice, real alive at this point. However, we can make this a little more interesting, I think. And instead of just using one singular leather swatch, one thing I've done before in the past, and that I'm going to do again, is I'm going to go back here to these items that I have, and we're actually going to grab another piece of leather here. You see, I got several different variations of brown and tan, and I believe we're going to go ahead and go for this more of a caramel color that we have here. So we're going to resize that, try to fit around the continent once again. And what I'm going to do this time on this one is, instead of making a whole brand new shape or anything like that, we're actually going to blend it. We're going to blend it, and we're going to use a clipping mask. So in your blending options, there's several different ways that you can do this. The great thing about Photoshop is there are multiple ways to achieve the exact same goal. I'm just using the drop-down menu right here. You can go through and find whatever blending option suits you best. Some of these options get so crazy that it's beyond out there. If you were creating a galaxy in something sci-fi, you had a planet from a far away view, some of those blending options might work. However, for us, we're not going that deep here, so we're not going to use anything too crazy. And as a matter of fact, what we're going to do is we're going to change the opacity of it as well. Now we've given it just a little bit of a different color, and some of that texture from that other piece of leather is starting to pop through. And I believe for those of you who are just listening and maybe aren't seeing this play out in real time, I believe the blending option that we are using is the overlay. Which is a typical option to use when you're trying to get to the safest blending option that you possibly can for multiple items. That overlay on top of each other, it's a pretty safe default if you're looking for something specific, just depending on, what you're doing there. So now that we've done that, we are going to use some other leather layers as well. You can blend it to your heart's desire. Now, once again, if you're not using leather, you don't have these, you don't want them, you can pick them up on our Patreon. However, if you don't want to do that, the internet is a wide and deep place. You can find almost anything that you want, any sort of material. It's something that not a whole lot of people would probably think of to use when constructing a map, especially digitally. Once we've digitized it, not very many people think, oh, let's use leather for all this, give it some life, give it some texture, some vibrance. And that may not even be you. You may be just fine with using simple colors and you go in and add the textures and everything yourself. Or you may find some different materials. Just be creative. It's your world. That's the whole point of this. I think that we're going to stop with this, the pieces that we currently have, because sometimes it doesn't always work out. You can pile on, make layers and layers. With a few of the options that I have, I'm not really feeling what we got here, not even with changing the opacity. I'm looking at it right now, and it's just not quite doing it for me. So I'm not entirely sure that we're actually going to use this piece that we just now dropped in. And that's part of the creative process. Try and try. You can't always force a square peg into a round hole. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. One rule that we've gone by when it comes to stuff like this, if it looks cool, it is cool. So that's the rule of cool as we typically tend to follow. So we're going to leave that layer off right now. However, we are still going to do a few more things with this. So what we're going to end up doing right now is we're going to go into, I right-clicked right here because I am working currently on a PC with a Logitech ball mouse that we talked about in our last video. And I'm going to go in here to the effects panel. And I'm going to click on Bevel Emboss. And as you can see, now we're starting to get some real depth here. This is where we're cooking with gasoline. Or petrol, as some of y'all might say across the pond. Either way, this is where you get to play with all kinds of cool effects. I kind of want this map to stand out, this landmass to look like it is something. So we're just going to be playing with some of these toggles here. You get to apply the depth to it, the smoothness of it. That is really what's going to be affecting the map, mostly around the edges. You see we got our inner bevel here, but there are several different options that you can choose. You see if you land on outer, if you land on the outer, inner bevel, all that kind of things, it changes it immensely. We are going to stick with what it was originally set on here, and that's going to make the land just pop up just a little bit. Make it look like we've got, you know, a light source coming in and we got some shadows and some highlights. When you're doing this, depending on the items you're using or what's going on, you can definitely play with this all that you want. You have different contour styles. You can mess with your highlights all you want. You can mess with your shadows. You want to be a little bit darker. If you don't want there to be as much pronouncement, that's fine too. See, all these are going to give you many, many different effects. Most of these are not going to apply to what we're currently doing. So, as you can see, the highlights skyrocket in some. The shadows are the ones that increase in others. I pretty much like what we have here at the standard base for this option. You can put the light direction any direction that you want. If it's not quite flowing the way that you want, that's fine too. So we're just going to play here a little bit. I have a little preview on the right side of that panel there. You can see what is happening with the shape. So I'm just going to mess with these just a little bit. And I think I'm settling for that right now. Pops it out just a little bit. You see we got some highlights. You see we got some shadows coming in on, well, what would be the western side of the continent. We got some shadows laying in, and we got the light source coming in from the east. So that gives it just a little bit of depth. And then what I want to do after that is we're going to go up here to filter. I want to make this just a little bit more rugged, give it a little bit more texture and life. So we're going to go into filters, down to unsharp mask, and you got a little preview box here in this panel, but you can also watch it in real time on your actual image right here. So as you can see, as we increase the sharpness, decrease the radius, it's going to take on a whole new life of its own. And I am using this filter on that secondary layer that we brought in, not the one that has the actual vector mask itself. Because this one, this more darker brown that we have, it's got just a lot of nice texture and creases going on there. So we set it to what we like, because I like that right there. That just gives it just a little bit more of a rustic vibe. What that means for the landmass itself, who knows? Does it mean anything? Doesn't have to. Can be just for looks. Because what you're doing is, or I should say what I'm doing is, creating this map to be something that we want it to be. This could be a real map in our world that looks exactly like this. You could be creating one that's like, okay, this is what the real map would look like in your story, versus one of what it would look like just for you, just for your reader, just for your tabletop party, whatever it might be. This is going to be a lot of area of, it's going to be up to you. So as you can see here, I've gone back, and one more layer that I've drawn in here is this nice turquoise layer. And this is going to be our ocean, actually. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of something going on with it here. We have that dark brown leather that's really messing with the color, and you can see at the top and bottom there are these rectangles, just these small areas that aren't quite matching. So what we need to do is what I talked about earlier, which is creating a clipping mask. Or create clipping mask. And right there, it's going to attach. Now you see it should have that little arrow pointing down. Scooch the swatch over just a little bit in your layers panel. Now, that layer is only going to show up on the layer below it. Your blending options are only going to affect that layer below it, which is our actual landmass that has the vector mask around it. So it won't affect any layers beyond that one. It is solely clipping into that layer. Now this gives us the opportunity to see this really vibrant, beautiful turquoise. So what I'm going to do for one of the examples that you can do, you may not always like it. This is a preference. I'm just going to see what it looks like whenever I take my clone stamp, and we're going to pick out a spot here, and we're going to just remove these highlights just because I want to see what this looks like. If we get rid of the highlights above and below, kind of even it out, mellow it out. See, we've reached the end of the page there. Pick another spot, get that a nice, decent blend. Voila. So, now we have our ocean. And we can still play with this to the extent that we did the land as well. If you want to use multiple leather layers, you can do that too. If you want to do some other stuff with it, feel free to do that as well. I really like this color, so I'm not going to bring in any more layers, but I can use the exact same filter that I just used, the unsharp mask. If you want this to have extreme texture, which is really what's happening right now, you can hit that unsharp mask, and that one just directly applied it because the image has been rasterized. So let's go in here. You can make the landmass stand out a little more if you want by giving it a stroke. Just give it a nice little black line, and that's going to make it stand out and make a hard definition so that you can see the landmass versus the ocean. Zoom in. Tons of texture, tons of feeling going on there. This is starting to look like a world. Now, we are far from finished from it. And after getting down in here deep, looking at this, I'm really digging it. These browns, these amber colors that we got going on for the land, that's great. I love the color for the ocean. I think, though, what we're going to do is we're going to pull another layer in here, And I think we're going to go ahead and get rid of such hard texturing that we have on the ocean is what we're going to do. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead and drop a new layer into here. And once I've done that, you're going to be able to see, once again, the highlights come back because we haven't done the clone or anything. You might like the highlights. That's another thing. I know that's a thing that Chad likes. He thinks it looks cool, and it's going to be all up to you because you may not be using these leathers once again. So what we're going to do is, I think I'm liking that a little bit better. One thing that we are going to do is probably remove the stroke from this. And instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to put a outer glow here. You'd think drop shadow, because we are going to make this like a shadow. However, for what we're doing for this specific occasion, an outer glow would work better, because it is going to capture your entire image. You don't have to worry about offsetting the shadow or anything like that. And we just change the white to black is what we're going to do. And then this is going to pretty much all come down to just feeling it out, just to make the land feel a little bit more integrated into the water. Make this map feel like it's all one solid piece versus what I did have, which was really almost looking like layers upon layers. So this would be more along the lines of something that we would love to obtain. So once we get it to this point, now I'm going to hand it off to Chad, and he's going to show you a few things to continue the process and really get this thing moving.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn, and Cody has left us a really cool looking colorations and depth on this landmass, sitting on a really cool turquoise ocean, using these leather pictures that we've had in our archives a long time. Like he said, you can go pick those up on Patreon, and we'll leave those links in the description. This is just, a cool, different, kind of unique backdrop for these maps. And so he has set this up to really be a nice land color as a base and a great base color as an ocean. And he's pretty much filled up this particular document, putting the landmass dead front and center. Not going to add any more out here. So for this purpose, generally maybe we would make it a lot bigger so you could add stuff later, but for this tutorial, we are kind of just front and center here with this landmass. And so we're going to start to populate this landmass with your geographical elements: mountains, trees, deserts, valleys, all kinds of different, things that you would see on our standard map of our world. And again, it's not perfect, it's not perfectly real or realistic, but it's close, and it certainly is, in my estimation, better than most maps that you're going to see in fantasy books. And stay tuned for a video we're going to do as a part of this series, or intermixed into this series, where we're going to show you our take on maps that are in fantasy books today and through the years, and how we're trying to basically set ourselves apart. And hopefully you can set yourself apart by creating more realistic and just more in-depth and inspirational maps. That's what these are for. At the same time, you're showing your reader or your players or whomever, whatever you're building this for, you're showing them where they are, where they're going, where they want to go, where they, places they may want to explore. And again, if you're doing this for a novel, you're just giving the reader a perspective. And so one of the things I like to start with is just a basic sense of how far we are looking at as far as distances. So let's just take from this cove here, or this bay, And from here to, let's say, the western side of this lake, let's say that's for just starting place 200 miles. And what we usually determine, though, distances to help us determine distances is how far we can travel in a day. Let's say horseback, our determinant is if you're on horse, you can travel 25 to 40 miles in a day, depending on the, topography of the map, depending on what's in your way, trees or, desert, mountains, whatever. If you're going over mountains, it's going to take you a lot longer to travel 25 to 40 miles. But that's a good starting place. And if you're on foot, you're probably talking about 15 to 20 miles a day. And that gives you a sense of how long it takes you to get places in your world for the reader or for the player, like I said, to be able to, help get into the world, help feel like this is realistic. So we know we're not jumping in cars and, going 70 miles an hour average somewhere. We know it's going to be much slower than that. Unless you're in sci-fi, which is going to be, whatever you're going to be traveling in. But in our case, we're talking as good as it gets is without using magic, you're going to be on foot or on horse or in a buggy or something. So that gives you, if this is 200 miles from here to here, that's going to give you a good understanding of mountain ranges, trees, and how far those elements, what's the span that they cover. So you can also go look at our world maps and see how big of a landmass the Rocky Mountains cover. And, it's pretty big distance from, north to south on the Rocky Mountains. But east to west, not near as far. So, all right. So basically we're going to start with a layer. We have a open layer here, and we're going to use, now this may be controversial, I don't know, but this is what we have found to be the easiest and best way to, or best tool to use to populate your land masses. You can see, I just pulled up a brush tip. So this brush tip is huge. So go up here to your brush. Let's use this one, and you can see the size is like 3,000 pixels. That's too big. Let's go to half of that, or no, let's go to 100 let's go to 100 here. So you can see that's much better. I'm going to use that was a pretty intricate brush tip, part of a set that we'll leave a link to here in the description as well that we got. But I'm going to use a simpler brush set, one that we've had for, a decade. You can see a lot of brush tips. So here is our mountains, hills, trees. And I'm going to start with this guy. You can see that's about the right size. That's 165 pixels, and we have our color set to black on our brush, and we have a layer that we will call, let's just call this for now, Western Mountains. Now, when you, some of you may like to do this, maybe not. You might want to name your region. So let's say that's a region, that area. That island is its own thing. You have a region here. You have a region here. You may want to go ahead and name those first. That way you can go ahead and name this mountain range. So if this region was whatever, then you might have a mountain range within that region that has pertinence to that region. And it would be named, accordingly. But for now, we're just going to start with a mountain range. Now, a lot of guys get real technical here, and I'm not going to, as it relates to plate tectonics and the theories of how mountains are made. we're going to say that in our world, mountains, it's undetermined how they're made, but they're here. And they're here because we need, topographical elements. Let's not get hung up on that just yet. But for those of you that like that, I mean, you could say that this lake maybe is on a tectonic plate line, right? So there is a line there, or whatever. Maybe there's mountains along that line. That's fine. But you hear, if you wanted to say that that range, or that mountain range, is going to be along that plate tectonic line from here to here, something like that. You can turn those brush tips, and you can see over here it's turning. I'm just using left and right cursor keys to turn those mountains. So let's go ahead and drop one in and see what it looks like. Oh, that's pretty cool. I don't like the way it changed when I turned it. So we will go ahead and turn that back to 90 or thereabouts. And we can just drop those, and you'll see when I use a couple of other brush tips how that'll look. But let's go ahead and do that. Opacity is at 100%, flow is at 100%. So you can see these guys pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom in, and you can see what that's looking like. Now, if I say, let's drop that, or let's flip that. Not that way. Let's flip the X. So you can flip the axis, or the axes on these brush tips as well, and give some different looks. You can use size. So, if you wanted to use size, to bring them down, to make them mix in a little bit more like this. You see how that does? It almost gives it a perspective, which is really, really neat. Or just go grab a different tip. You see how these are going to go a little bit more lateral. So let's go ahead and get rid of both of those and use this lateral, more horizontal mountain. And that looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and use our bracket key to make a little bit bigger. Doesn't look realistic enough for me. So let's go ahead and grab this guy again. And I like the way that one sets on there. So let's do another smaller one like we had. Yeah, see how that really starts to look cool. This is a bigger mountain here, kind of more of a singular mountain, but when you drop it in here, like, let's turn that guy a little bit more. Yeah, see, that really looks cool. And again, I'm looking for realistic, always. Let's do a axis flip on that. Yeah, that looks cool. Now you can see it's starting to come, going more of a line, which is kind of helps those guys who want to see that on a tectonic shift line, I guess. Now you start to see it getting a lot of different. And I have a lot of different mountains brushes. And they're all kind of similar. But you see, you can drop in singular mountains, bigger, smaller, and it'll start to really make it look. But see, there's a little valley going on right there, which I kind of like. Let's make that one bigger. Yeah. bigger. They're starting to be a thing. Now I'll show you how I kind of taper those off if you're kind of get down into like foothills. And you can just do, again, different versions, shrink them down. And that kind of lets everybody know that the mountains are getting smaller. And let's do this one again. And you can see when it gets smaller, it really takes on a whole different look. Now you're starting to have a cool looking mountain range. Now, for realism, let's go ahead and we're going to take some of the smaller or the, different smaller or different tips and make them smaller and do some little croppings or outcroppings of mountains that would be like, just, again, a realistic as you can get. That kind of tells the onlooker that, hey, this range kind of had a little bit of a it kind of, just, it wasn't just so symmetrical. This kind of gives it some asymmetry and realism. So I kind of like the way that's looking. Let's go ahead and drop in just a few more. Let's shift that around. Use your arrow, your cursor. Yeah. So now you're starting to see where it's like, man, there's some big mountains right there. Gets down to smaller, even smaller over here. And let's try this. Yeah, just gives a little bit more dimension. Small, small, small. Small. Now, when you close in on that guy, see how that really starts to really be cool. They're kind of dense, but they're small. So now that we're close in, let's just go ahead and make that a little bit more foothilly, if that's a word. All right, so now, man, you could think about a really cool city right there on that lake. Cities over here on the coast. You've got ways to travel around the mountains. But I think I want to go ahead and extend it up that way some. Yeah, let's make a big sucker right there. And you see where those overlap? That's okay. It looks fine. It doesn't do really anything to make it look unrealistic. And you see, by just using big and small versions of the same brush, you can do a lot. Yeah, that's really cool. You see there's a valley right there. And probably a way through somewhere, maybe right here. Just kind of zigs and zags all the way through. That's just a happy, accident. Not to borrow Bob Ross's euphemisms, but certainly, it just happens. Now, that's pretty cool for a mountain range. But what about trees? There's going to be trees. There's going to be forests around these probably. And we can go ahead and start thinking about another layer. Just add this layer, and we're going to call this, for now, Western Forest. So we've got a different layer, and we're going to use a different brush tip, of course, but we're also going to go ahead and use a different color, because I like to start in the same vein of what a forest would, actually be. And I got a really, really dark green there, and you'll see, that may need to be adjusted depending on how it looks on this land. That may be almost black. Let's go there. And let's go pick up a tree brush tip. One of my favorites for fantasy maps, this kind of tree. Let's blow that guy up a little bit just so we can see. Yeah, so there's your little lone evergreen tree. But let's go ahead and get a set of them. Yeah, there we go. It's a little green. Let's go ahead and just make it a little bit darker. Try that. And we're going to go ahead and do some forests around this southern. And you can see by doing these sets, you can really populate it fast. But again, this is fun. Don't go too fast. It's meant to be cathartic in some ways. And let's get close on this guy. Let's blow that one up. Pretty cool brush tip. And again, this is really close in. I mean, we're at like 300%. We're not ever going to get that close with the naked eye. But I like to really get in there close and tight whenever you're doing some of these things to give it realism. Some of these trees might live up in here. And again, you can get detailed as you want. You can really make the mountains populated with trees. Again, just using different tips. I like these tips because they also have shadows. And again, and you can flip that. You want to be careful flipping the X and Y axis on some of these, because if they do have shadows, you don't want to get those all mixed up. So keep the shadows going one way. This is a different kind of tree. Not really my favorite. It does, kind of get a different point across in some applications. Let's just keep it in the evergreen mix here. And let's say these trees get a little bigger up around here. And I'm just using my bracket keys to make these trees different sizes. And again, that's just a good, hotkeys are great for this kind of application because you're moving fast. You're wanting to just make it look as populated and as real as you can make it look in relatively short order. So, man, now you're starting to see it, right? We get some cool forestation there, cool mountain range. Now, another trick I didn't show you, let's go back to the mountain layer. Let's go back to a mountain brush tip. Where did you go? There you are. And let's say they're not showing up exactly like you want them to on the mountains. So we don't want them green. Back to black. And let's go double click. See how the double click made them darker? That's another trick you can use that'll give perspective when you're making these mountain ranges. just a little darker in some areas. You can take another layer, and let's just say lush. For now, again, this valley will probably be called something. Let's go to a standard brush tip. This is going to be just a soft-edged, and let's go down to the opacity and let's turn it down to like 40%. And let's just play around with, go back to our greens. And let's see what that looks like. We're going to turn this valley into a lush valley. Making sure our softness is all the way to 0%. Our hardness is all the way to 0%. And let's just go ahead and start filling this in. Opacity is just about right. And you can see when you double click on it, it gets greener. And I like to, again, just give it some darkness, some lightness, just to give it some realism. And if you mess up, you can basically, you don't want to do any masking. So just try to be careful with your, how many times you're hitting your brush, right? So you don't want your mountains to be green, right? So when you get into, getting close to these mountains, just kind of stay on the outside of them. So let's back off of that. So you can see there now that you've got a green, lush area in there. I don't like how dark it is. So let's start over with that guy. Or we could, let's just start over. And again, this is something you're going to just get a feel for as you go. I'm going to leave the mountain range itself alone, but I am going to go over here and turn this area into a greener area, pasture land or just a valley. Let's do another layer. And again, we're going to go, let's see, lush valley. And you're going to get a pile. I mean, you're going to get innumerable amounts of layers over here. This file is going to get really, really large. And that's okay because this is a big world. And there's all kinds of different brush tips you can use instead of just a regular round brush. I'm just showing you this for ease. Let's make it bigger. And I'm not the Photoshop expert that Cody is. I'm using the rule of cool here. And if it doesn't look cool, I don't use it. All right, so that's your green area of fertile farmland, let's call it. And let's say we want to go back to the mountains, but we're going to not do this on the same brushes as the mountains because that would get kind of crazy. Let's just do a new layer, and let's call this one snow. And let's just flip the brush tip using your X. And you can do the same technique. And again, if you want to go get some different brushes to help you in this, feel free. But I like to turn the opacity down to start with. Let's call it 15%. Make our brush a little smaller. And you can see that just starts to give you some idea that these are some tall mountains. And then again, if you want to double click, you're going to get a brighter white. You can be as detailed here as you want, or as implied as you want. Now, again, a lot of art uses implication or implied realism, which is all we're really kind of doing here. Really, it's not, it's just enough to make it look real and believable and inspiring, and we just want to get the reader in the world. All right, so there's you some white-capped mountains, some lush green land, some forests. If you really are getting, let's say, we're getting, a forest right up next to a green, lush land like that. You could come in here, and instead of doing green, right, you could do, let's just for sake of making this look different, we turned them black. Let's just mix in some black overlay. Yeah, so that looks cool. On this lush valley, you could also do, these are some tips. Again, we're going to give you links to these tips. But a brush tip that would be more of a indicator of swamp, or just some sort of vegetation. See, that just gives you a little indicator of, hey, there's some vegetation here, but it's pretty lush looking on the map itself. So, you can see those white-capped mountains. Maybe they don't look quite real enough for you. That snow, yeah, it's a little bit misty looking. So let's just do a quick update on that. This is going to make it look, if you go in really tight like that, it's going to make it look less misty. And more, thought through, more detailed. But mostly just implied, right? We're not just doing it, coloring the lines here, paint by number, which is not what we want to do. See, that looks much better to me. It doesn't look quite as misty. And again, on this green here, if you wanted to use, well, you just saw me mess up there. So I did this snow ended up popping through, or ended up being on my lush valley, right? That's going to happen. You're going to do that, and it's going to drive you crazy. So play around with it. You can do all kinds of different fun brush tips. And again, you're going to see when you back out of this guy how realistic or non-realistic things are going to be. So that is the beginning of using these brush tips on your map. We're going to go probably populate this some more, and then when we come back to you, we'll see some more of this done up. But this is a great start for you to get an idea of how realistic and how easy it is to build mountains and forest. The next thing we're going to do in the next video is talk about rivers and talk about how to place roads, and then how we do region names across the land without them getting in the way, but they still show up and you can still see them. And then after that, we'll name oceans and bodies of water together. You're going to see us do all of this. So this will get you started. And again, we'll leave the links in the description for some of these brush sets, and you can add those to your library. And man, you can be on your way with building these great looking maps. So yeah, thanks for watching this part of it, and we'll see you again on the next Photoshop session in the next episode. And again, we'll look forward to that. See you then. We are back. So hopefully after watching that, it's pretty deep, I would say. Now, again, you're probably thinking, that's not that deep. It's not crazy. It's pretty simple. Yeah, it is. But if you don't have the tools, or you've never used Photoshop, or frankly, this is all just brand new to you and it seems daunting, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of practice to get in, this, deep with us. Now, we have done some things that will help you. If you go to our Patreon page, we'll leave the link right below in the description here. You can pick up these map backgrounds, these leather swatches that are in our archives. Like I told you in the first video, we have done a lot of different businesses. One of our best and most successful businesses was we were making leather goods. And that was about a 10-year run right up to COVID. More on that later. But we have an archive of great imagery that we, it's just sitting there. And we thought, well, hey, let's use this again for our maps, and let's make this available to you guys. And so you can go to our Patreon page in our shop, and, you can pick those up fairly cheap. And we'll be adding more of our archive pictures to that shop as we go. So you can, skip some steps, right?
Right. And always keep in mind, this is how we have done it. This is what we've done through the years. It's the tools that were available to us. So we really just want to give you an inside look of how maybe some different techniques, some different ways that we would do it, as opposed to making another, the 100th video out there on the internet, or maybe the 1000th at this point, of somebody pouring a bag of dice or a bag of rice or Legos or whatever, and then tracing
blocks,
vague shapes, on a piece of paper. If that's the way that you've done it, you want to do it, that's fine, but you guys don't need another video of that. So we just wanted to make it something that was very personal and very integrated with how we have done things this whole entire time. Once again, I get some of you guys don't have access to Photoshop, and it does get to be an investment. We were very fortunate with this, and it was part of, our necessities for building businesses. So there is GIMP out there. That's very, very close. I've used GIMP plenty in my life, my personal life, and things like that. It's just going to be a matter of getting down there and learning it. Some people are so skilled, you could use Microsoft Paint. I've seen some people do some wild stuff in that, and it blows my mind. There's other free programs out there as well, other techniques, or for you, maybe you wanted to just do it a completely different way, that's fine. But hopefully what this does is give you just an insight to just a completely kind of separate way of doing things that maybe you haven't seen, or that's just a little bit different than what you've seen out there on the internet, and mostly to spark that creativity. Because once again, we've said it several times, probably sounding like a broken record, but there's no other point, because if we're not creating, we're dead.
Right.
Hopefully YouTube doesn't take that the wrong way. But regardless, that's what this is all about. Get those creative juices flowing. Maybe you saw something in this video that gets you to a point where you're like, oh, that sparks an idea, and it may not have anything to do with what you've seen here. That is okay. If you do have access to this kind of stuff, or at least similar things, hopefully this gets you started and down the road to making your own world, whether it's a tabletop RPG, whether it's a novel, whether it's a short story, whether it's a video game, whether you're trying to create something wholly new that hasn't really ever been conceived. You're making your own board game, for all I know, or you're just doing it for fun. Either way, we hope that this has been of some help to you and that you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. This one was a little bit of a lengthier one because you got to watch some of this in real time. You got to even watch the mistakes, quote unquote, in real time. You got to watch kind of the thinking process in real time about how you feel about certain things that you don't know how it's going to look until you're actually physically there doing it. And then all of a sudden you're like, that didn't look as good as I thought it was going to. That's fine. That's all part of the process. Go back and take Bob Ross's, words. That's exactly what this is. Just happy little accident. That's all it is.
Yeah. And so ultimately, like Cody said, this is all about creating. This whole channel, this whole show, everything is us creating. And that is sometimes a very raw, crazy, challenging, difficult, and graphic process, right? It's a lot of pains. It's a lot of, we still, when we don't know how to do something, we just go Google it, right? You got to learn on the fly. Even if you went to college and got an education, a 4-year degree in how to use Photoshop and all these tools that we're using, it's obsolete in a year because of updates, because of different things. Now, again, the fundamentals are generally there and they're core and they're the same. But what I'm saying basically is you're going to get a lot of things that we're doing that will help you shortcut a lot of the difficult, challenging educational problems that come up when you're trying to learn some of these programs, and just kind of take off of the guard. Let your guard down and just create. Just have fun and be free and be willing to make mistakes. That's what it's all about. So you're going to see me personally. I made a lot of mistakes. I am not the Photoshop guy that Cody is, but part of that is what makes us work, because I am a creative, raw, like just get it down on paper. I'm very fast usually, and sometimes that has a lot of shortcuts and it leaves some markers to that, right? Cody has to go back and clean some things up sometimes of mine, but that's what makes us work. If you have someone that you're collaborating with, I absolutely would suggest that you do that and revel in it. If you don't, try it, because it really takes the pressure off. You've got someone that you can lean on, vice versa. One of you is going to be better at something than the other, and that's going to really make this work. So hopefully you're enjoying us doing this together, and hopefully we're giving you some very, very good ideas and techniques. And yes, it is Christmas time, like we said before. It's really not Christmas time yet, but at our house, it is. In our Crucible room here, we are already enjoying the frills and
festivities,
the decking of the halls, if you will. So again, go back and watch the first video. This is part 2, and really we're just getting into it. I don't know how many episodes this is going to be, but stay tuned. Also, we're going to put up another video that you can watch that is not necessarily in this series, but we're going to talk some more about maps.
Right.
And looking forward to getting that out to you. So again, I'm Chad.
I'm Cody.
And we are the Creation Crucible. This is our show here in our little world, and we're glad to bring it to you. So stay tuned for part 3, right? Episode 3. That's coming very soon. So hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you then.